Welcome to the E6000 instruction video. The E6000 is the most sophisticated use of computer technology combined with the most advanced knitting machine design in the world. This tape will show you how to unpack and assemble the E6000 and learn the skills of machine knitting. The videotape is designed for you to learn at your own pace. The tape has built-in breaks so that you can practice or complete a task. When you come to a built-in break, the screen will go black. Stop or pause the tape and complete the task. Also, stop the tape or rewind and review the material whenever needed. Practicing ensures that you will become comfortable and confident using your machine. Have confidence in yourself. It takes everyone time to learn. Most important, have fun and relax. This videotape has been updated to show instructions for assembling the new T601 stand. However, the knitting instruction portion of the tape still shows the old stand model. Some differences may be seen between your stand and the stand shown later in the video. To begin, get a sturdy table and a pair of scissors. Cover the table with a protective pad. It is also good to have the help of a second person when assembling the stand and machine. Open the flat box by cutting the straps. Remove all the contents of the box. Set the parts and instructions on the table. Replace all packing materials and set the box aside. On the table should be two side stand supports, a lower back support, an upper back support, one tray, and two Electra mount supports in a tool and screw package. As shown in box 1 of the instructions, lean the right side stand support R facing in against a table or similar support approximately 60 centimeters high and 85 centimeters long. Take the upper back support and lay it onto the support with the smooth side facing in and the two screw holes facing up. Use two socket screws and washers and attach the upper back support to the right side stand support with the supplied tool. Do not tighten yet. Lean the left side stand support against the upper back support, L facing in. Attach it with two socket screws and washers. Now tighten all four screws. As shown in box 2 of the instructions, take the lower back support, smooth side out, and fasten it to the side stand supports. Use a socket screw and washer from the outside and a spring washer and hexagon nut from the inside. It is easiest to rest the lower back support onto a support approximately 28 centimeters high. As shown in box 3 of the instructions, mount the two Electra motor supports with the special screws. Also shown in box 3 of the instructions is how to fasten the tray. Align the holes of the tray with the openings on the right side stand support. Use the Phillips head screws with washers. Box 4 of the instructions shows how to use casters on the stand. If your stand has casters, retract them now by lifting up on one side of the stand and pushing the small catch on the outside of the side stand supports. The catch releases and the casters move inside. For those who have an adapter system to attach the computer console and mast holder to the upper stand, open the small adapter system box. Take out the instructions and parts and place on the table. Set the box aside. Loosen the inside head screw on both holders till the metal plate is loose using the tool. Turn the metal plate so it can slide inside the top back support. Then turn the metal plate vertical. Adjust the distance and tighten the screw as shown in box 1 of the instructions. The mast holder should be 25 centimeters from its outside edge to the end of the right opening of the upper back support. The console holder should be positioned 25 centimeters from its inside to the end of the left opening of the upper back support. This is shown in box 2 of the instructions. When the support is positioned correctly, completely tighten the screws. Cut the straps on the large box. Remove the cardboard cover, styrofoam sections, protective paper, and cardboard inserts at the edge of the box. The front of the bed has 2 arrows on the lower left edge. Carefully take the needle beds out of the box. As shown in box 5 of the instructions, place the machine onto the stand. The 2 white angles on top of each stand support should be between the 2 needle beds. Also, on the left is a screw on the knitting machine that matches the hole on top of the left side stand support. Fasten the needle beds with the 2 C-clamps between the 2 white angles of the side stand supports. The C-clamp with the white yarn clip is placed on the right. Take the small plastic bag out of the styrofoam and remove the brush. Use this brush to dust off any styrofoam or other particles that may have gotten on the parts during shipping. Remove the oil tube from the styrofoam and pierce the end. Never use any other oil on the Passap but the Bellador oil supplied by Passap dealers. Make sure the brush is free of dust. Don't put oil directly onto any parts. Instead, place 2 or 3 drops of oil on the brush. The front and back beds each have 3 horizontal metal strips which run the length of the bed. Brush the oil inside the center metal strips, called guide rails, of back and front beds. This will help the lock move across the beds more easily. Put a few more oil drops on the brush and oil only the bottom groove of the top rails. Add 2 or 3 drops of oil to the brush. Oil the feet of the needles that stick out next to both center guide rails. Oil the bottom guide rail on the front bed. And oil the metal comb on the bottom of the back bed. Take out the folded assembly sheet from the manual. Look at the diagram for oiling the locks. The locks are still in the styrofoam with their underside exposed. The back lock is the one with the brushes on the upper edge. Follow the needle path shown on the diagram with the oiled brush. Take the back lock out of the styrofoam. Hold the lock with the brushes facing front. Fit the white runners of the back lock into the guide rails of the back bed starting from the left. Slide the lock to the right of the needle bed. Take the front lock out of the styrofoam. Remove the plastic bag and oil as done with the back lock. Hold the front lock by the handle with the left end tilted slightly down. Insert the black runner above the center guide rail, with the white angled runner below the guide rail. As soon as it is inserted, tilt the front lock up and slide the white runner into the upper rail. Before sliding the front lock to the right, place the cable on top of the lock. Push the connecting bolt upward until it clicks into place so that both locks are connected. Next, remove the racking handle. Turn the white cam on the racking handle to face the same direction as the handle. Under the needle beds at the left are two support holders for the racking handle. Insert the racking handle with handle and cam up into these two support holders. Snap the handle into the socket. If the racking handle is assembled correctly, the handle turns either direction, moving the back bed and racking indicator. The racking indicator is the small metal arrow at the bottom left of the front bed. It moves either to the left or right. The scale with numbers located on the top left end of the front bed is the other racking indicator. The right black arrow opposite the numbers is part of the indicator also, and is normally opposite the 0. Take the mast out of the styrofoam. The mast has a hole at one end and a hole and slot at the other end. Insert the end with only the hole into the front slot of the mast holder. Carefully take the tension arm with two cables attached out of the styrofoam. Insert the white coupling surrounding the straight cable into the mast so the spiral cable is facing forward. The white plastic joint under the tension arm slides over the top of the mast. The tension arm should point to the front. Remove the tension wires from the styrofoam. Slide the white plastic coupling into the back of the tension arm. The wires should be pointing to the front. Remove the triangular clamp with the two eyelets from the styrofoam. Fit the triangular clamp onto the mast, with the eyelets tilted upward and the teeth pointing up. Slide the clamp onto the mast above the upper notches. Make sure that the cable is secured in the center. Push the clamp down until it rests on the notches. Take the V-shaped bracket for the cups out of the styrofoam and fit it onto the mast above the lower notches with the closed side facing up. Slide the bracket down until it rests on the notches. Slide the yarn cups onto the bracket. Fit the connecting piece of the spiral cable to the support on the left-hand side of the back lock. Slide until it clicks into place. Plug the connecting cable from the front lock into the connecting piece of the back lock. Make sure that the notch on the cable faces up to match with the groove on the back lock. To assemble a 4-color changer, use the instructions supplied, or the dealer may help with its assembly and use. A 2-color changer is used on this video. Take the 2-color changer out of the styrofoam. At the far right, under the back needle bed, there are 2 wing nuts. Loosen these without removing them. Slide the color changer between the machine and the two wing nuts fitting the screws into the slits of the color changer base. Tighten wing nuts firmly. Take both feeding eyelets out of the styrofoam. The narrow bottom of the feeding eyelet has a metal cap. Above the metal cap are two rings. Insert the feeding eyelet into the color changer holder with the two rings between the two spring clips. Press this holder down. Repeat this process with the other feeding eyelet and holder. Take the computer control console out of the styrofoam. Remove the detachable support bracket by pulling out the spring-loaded pins on both sides. Line up the holes in the arm of the console holder with the metal pins of the computer console and insert the pins into the hole of the arm by letting go of the spring-loaded pins. Lay the computer console against the arm. Take the cable that runs down inside the back of the tension arm and secure it away in the slots of the mast holder, down the back and up on the lower left side. Lay the cable inside the upper stand support and behind the adapter system arm. Insert the plug of the cable into the socket on the top left of the computer console. Make sure that the cable goes to the back of the computer console. After the cable is plugged in, work it down the left groove of the arm and lay it along the marks. Push it into the arm holder as done with the mast holder. Do the same with the power cable along the other side. Take all remaining accessories out of the styrofoam and place these on the tray of the stand. Place the styrofoam sections and other packing material back into the machine box and put them away. It's a good idea to keep the box in case there is ever a need for transporting the machine. The machine is now fully assembled. Next is threading. The knitting practice pieces on this tape have been designed for a fine 4-ply yarn. The practice pieces will use 2 colors of yarn on cones of 500 grams each. The Passap E6000 is designed for a wide variety of yarns, such as 2 to 4 ply, summer weight cottons, metallic yarns, fine mohair, baby double knit, and standard double knit. For those with a 4-color changer, program it so the 2 left feeding eyelets are changing automatically. For those with a 2-color changer, at the far right side of the bed is a metal hook, the color changer lever. Pull the color changer lever to the right twice so both feeding holders come up. Press down the feeding holder on the left. Pull the color changer lever once to the right. Press down the right feeding holder, but do not pull the color changer lever again. Move the lock to the far right until it operates the color changer lever. The left feeding eyelet is brought automatically into the jaw of the lock. When the jaw is closed, only the head of the feeding eyelet should be seen. If more than just the head of the feeding eyelet is above the jaw,
the yarn will not reach the needles to knit. The color changer is now programmed and will automatically change color every time the lock goes to the far right by tripping the color changer lever. Set the 2 cones of yarn on the floor, under the mast. The yarn on the left-hand side becomes color 1. Take the small silver tool that looks like a needle with an eyelet on each end from the tray. This is the double-end bodkin. Thread the yarn from the left cone into the double-end bodkin. Bring the bodkin with yarn up through the left eyelet of the triangular clamp. Move the bodkin up between the 2 tension discs by pulling the outer disc away slightly. Make sure the yarn is under the small pin in the back. Next, thread the yarn through the lower opening on the left at the other end of the tension arm. Thread down through the eyelet on the very front of the tension arm. Move the lock so the feeding eyelet is directly under the yarn. Thread the double-end bodkin through the feeding eyelet. Bring the yarn from underneath the bed and remove the double-end bodkin and set it in the tray. Secure the yarn tail onto the clip on the right C-clamp under the bed. Bring down the eyelet of the left tension wire to the yarn between the tension arm eyelets. Slide the yarn into the eyelet, making sure it is not twisted around the eyelet and flows freely. To set the tension, pull down on the yarn below the triangular clamp. Pull the yarn down until the tension wire almost touches the front threading eyelet. Let the yarn go. The distance between the tension arm eyelet and the tension wire eyelet should be 15 to 20 centimeters. If it spans a larger distance, turn the tension dial to a larger number. If it spans a smaller distance, turn the tension dial to a smaller number and recheck. Now move the lock to the right to operate the color changer lever. The empty feeding eyelet is in the jaw. Move the lock to the left so that the feeding eyelet is under the tension arm. Thread the yarn on the right in the same way as on the left. Bring the right yarn down into the feeding eyelet behind the left yarn. The left cone of yarn is threaded through the left feeding eyelet to become color number 1. The right cone of yarn is threaded through the right feeding eyelet to become color number 2. Now bring the lock to the right. If the left feeding eyelet comes up, push it back down out of the lock. Move the empty lock a little to the left. If anything covered thus far was confusing, please review the tape or manual before going on. Next is learning to knit with a computer. The knitting practice pieces and garments knit on this tape are simple. Their main function is instructional. Learning the basic steps to machine knitting is made much easier with the computer. The computer has been designed to make knitting more enjoyable and easier. The language of the computer is simple and helps with every step to ensure successful knitting. The computer console has 3 main areas. At the top right is the visual display. This is where the computer speaks. The computer asks questions and gives directions and reminders in this window. Below the display window is a keypad. This is how the operator speaks to the computer and answers questions. At the top and bottom of the console are two horizontal slits. Pattern sheets with self-made patterns are fed into these openings and advanced with the transport wheel at the bottom left. In this way, there is no limit to the number of patterns which can be entered into the computer. On the right edge of the console is the on-off switch. Turn the switch on.
Machines which have not been used before or which have not been used for at least 10 days will bring up this display. The computer is saying that there is nothing in its memory. Some machines may have been tested by the dealer recently, and the computer will say wait. In this case, wait for the computer to prepare. The computer is ready to program when the display window says PROGR or Program. If another display appears, press the key with the 3 arrows until PROGR comes onto the screen. The key with the 3 arrows is called the fast-forward key. Should this key be blocked, press Enter first. If the display in the window is not in English, press the R key when the display Program is visible to get to the languages. For those with memory on the display, press the Enter key. This tells the computer, yes, it should memorize or store the upcoming information. The computer will next check which language to speak in. Push the No key for languages not wanted. The computer is asking if it should speak in English. Push the Enter key to say yes. It takes a moment while the computer loads its English language information into the program. The display now says PROGR, which stands for Program. The computer asks if it is to be programmed. To program a computer is to tell the computer how it is to help. Push Enter to say yes. The computer is asking if it should erase any other program that may be left in its memory. Press Enter, yes. The computer is asking what type of cast-on is going to be done. The different types of cast-ons will be explained later. For now, press the number 3 and Enter. The computer asks if these are all the patterns that are needed for this practice piece. Push No. It now asks which is stitch pattern A, or the first stitch pattern to be used. How to select patterns is also shown later in the tape. For now, press number 1, 2, 3, 9 and Enter. The computer asks if this stitch pattern is going to be altered. Press the No key. The computer asks which knitting technique is going to be used. Knitting techniques will also be covered later. For now, press number 183 and Enter. Is the stitch pattern going to be enlarged or positioned on the garment? Press the No key. The computer asks if a test piece of this type cast-on and pattern is needed. Press the No key. Is this all of the stitch pattern information? Press Enter, yes. The computer asks if the garment is going to be formed or shaped. As this is only a practice, no shaping is needed. Therefore, press the No key. How many of the left needles, L for left and ND for needles,
are going to be used. The computer reminds that there are a possible 90 needles on the left side of the front bed. Above the center guide rail is the needle scale. Starting in the center, the scale marks the needle positions, 90 to the left and 90 to the right. When setting up the needles, there are two positions. The working position, where the needle heads must be level with the top edge of the needle bed, and the out-of-work position, where the feet of the needles touch the center needle rail. At the lower edge of the front needle bed are the front pushers. Pushers help to achieve the knitting patterns. These pushers are now in the out-of-work position. Take the orange ruler and bring up 25 pushers starting from the center to the left. Align them with the fine marks on the lower half of the front needle bed. This is the working position. When the pusher feet are in line with the lower end of the needle channels, this is the at-rest position. The lock moves the pushers up and down according to the pattern being knit. Press 25 on the computer and the minus sign to indicate that the needles are left of center. Then press Enter. How many of the right needles, R for right and ND for needles, are going to be used? Also, the computer reminds that there are 90 needles available on the right side of the bed. With the orange ruler, bring up 25 pushers starting from the center to the right. Press 25 on the computer and press Enter. The computer asks, "Is everything ready to start the cast on or to start knitting?" Press Enter. The computer asks that the lock be put at the start position. The lock has an arrow pointing to the needle bed. That arrow pointing to the last right gray bar is called start position. Be sure the arrow is not pointing to the right of the last gray bar. By giving the computer this position, the computer can know where the lock is at all times, and all knitting is centered in the needle bed. Place the lock at the start position and press Enter. During the following knitting instructions, the computer asks questions by flashing the message. Answer the question by pressing Enter before going on to the next step. The computer is ready to cast on. Press Enter. Yes. The three bars at the bottom of the display indicate that the computer is talking about the front. The SX is a lock setting. The NX lever is on the left side of the front lock and on the right side of the back lock. The pattern selector dial is on the right side of the front lock and on the left side of the back lock. This dial is used to select the type of stitch. Set the NX lever to N on the front lock. Set the pattern selector dial to S. Then move the NX lever back to X. Press the Enter key. The bars at the top of the display indicate that the back is to be set. On the back lock, set the NX lever to N. Set the pattern selector to G. Then move the NX lever to X. Press Enter. This means to move the lock across the bed once, with the lock empty, that is, with no yarn in the lock. Make sure no feeding eyelet is in the lock, then move the lock smoothly across the needles in working position. This is the symbol for the racking handle in the down position. The racking handle lines up the needles on the back bed with the needles on the front bed. Turn the racking handle down. Check the upper racking indicator. The O on the front bed and the black arrow of the back bed must be almost opposite. Press Enter. The computer asks if the needles on the front bed are set correctly. ND stands for needles. The 3 bars indicate the front bed. Press Enter. Yes, the needles are in the correct position. Move the lock across empty. Put the correct number of needles on the back bed in working position. 25 needles to the right and 25 needles to the left of center are brought into working position. There is a very important rule when knitting, called the needle rule. It must be observed at all times when knitting on both beds. The rule is that the last needle in working position at right is on the back bed. The last needle in working position at left is on the front bed. Make sure that the needles are set up according to the needle rule. Place the edge springs on the last needle in working position at left and right on the front and back beds. When placing them on the needles, it is important to make sure the latches are closed. The needle should flow freely underneath the edge spring. The edge springs, 2 on each bed, must be used whenever knitting to give a neat edge. Press Enter. The computer asks that color 1 be brought into the lock. Take the first feeding eyelet into the lock by moving the lock to the far right of the bed. The lock will automatically pick up a feeding eyelet. Make sure color number 1 is in the lock. If by chance color number 2 is in the lock, change color by moving the lock to the far right to engage the color changer. Press Enter. The computer asks to set the stitch size. The stitch size regulator dial is at the center of the back and front lock. The stitch size is determined by the weight and thickness of the yarn. Set the stitch size dial to 4 on back and front locks. Press Enter. The computer asks to insert the strippers. O for orange color. Insert the strippers into the lock. The stripper holders are found on the back lock. The strippers slide in until the small latch clicks into place. Strippers are used to keep each stitch perfect without having to use troublesome cast-on combs and weights. The orange strippers are used for double bed knitting. Black strippers are used for single bed knitting. To remove the strippers, depress the small white key and pull out. Press Enter. This means to turn the racking handle counterclockwise. Turn the racking handle 1 complete turn counterclockwise. As the racking handle is turned, the back bed moves to the left. Also, there are 2 clicks, one when the handle is up and one when the handle is down. Press Enter. Set the front lock to LX. Remember to always set the NX lever to N before moving the pattern selector dial. Set the pattern selector to L. Then return the NX lever to X. Press Enter. Back lock should be set to N. Set the back NX lever to N. The computer has no more messages. The last message is still in the window and has stopped flashing. If Enter is pushed, the computer will give a current display of the row counter. The manual row counter is on the upper left-hand side of the front lock. It counts the number of rows knit. The three small white knobs above the row counter allow the row counter to be set individually. The small lever to the right of the knobs is to reset the row counter to 0. The trip cam for the row counter is on the front bed. The trip cam is the black narrow piece that slides in the upper guide rail of the front bed. Knit one row by moving the lock across to the left. The computer now says that it is time to turn the racking handle one full turn clockwise. Turn the racking handle one turn clockwise. The display is not flashing, so no communication is needed with the computer. Press Enter to have a display of the row counter. Knit one row. This display says the cast-on is finished or ended. Press Enter to return to the row counter display. Knit 10 rows using even and regular movements to move the lock across the needles. Not too fast, not too far beyond the edge of the knitting. The lock is at the right side of the needle bed when done. The row counter display shows 12 rows. Next is pattern knitting. To do this, press the ABC key. The computer asks if stitch pattern A is the pattern to be knit. Press Enter. Set the front lock to SX. Set the NX lever to N. Turn the stitch pattern dial to S. Return the NX lever to X. Press Enter. Set the back lock to GX. Turn the stitch pattern dial to G. Turn the NX lever to X. Press Enter. Move the lock to the far right of the bed, and the color 1 eyelet will be dropped off. When the lock reaches the end, the second feeding eyelet moves up, ready to be picked up by the lock. Press this second eyelet down so the lock remains empty. Remove the orange strippers. There should be no strippers in place when the lock is empty. Move the lock to the left. Check that the racking handle is down. Press Enter.
Are the 50 needles on the front bed still in working position? Press Enter. Move the lock to the right.
Notice that 2 of the pushers on the front bed have been pushed down or into rest position by the lock as it went by. The lock is preparing the pushers to knit the selected stitch pattern.
Are the 50 needles on the back bed still in working position? Press Enter.
The computer message says that 2 colors are to be used and that the colors are going to be changed every 2 rows. Move the lock to the far right to pick up color number 1 eyelet. Press Enter. The front and back lock stitch size remain on 4. Press Enter. Insert the orange strippers, one on each side of the back lock. Press Enter. The front lock should be on LX. Move the NX lever to N. Turn the pattern selector dial to L. Return the NX lever to X. Press Enter. The back lock should be set on N. Move the NX lever to N. The display is no longer flashing, so the computer has no more instructions at this time. Press Enter. Set the manual row counter to 0. Notice that the computer display still reads 12, even though the row counter on the lock has been reset to 0. The computer row counter is always total rows knit from the cast on. When it is helpful to keep a row count within sections of a garment, use the manual row counter. Knit 80 rows. Use even and regular knitting action. Every 2 rows, take the lock to the right and change the color. After 10 rows, reach under and release the yarn from the yarn clip. This will give an even and symmetric edge. Take the lock to the far right and put both feeding eyelets down. Set the locks to N on back and front lock. With the left hand, hold the knitting underneath. With the right hand, move the lock across and back again. The knitting is released from the machine. Break the yarn off the end of the knitting and secure the yarn from the cones into the clip under the bed. This is a finished sample. The stitches are loose on the end of the knitting and can unravel. To keep the stitches from unraveling, thread the loose yarn into a needle and push the needle through every loose stitch. Pull the needle out and fasten the thread. This knitting swatch was made to introduce knitting with the help of a computer. It may be helpful to practice more with this practice piece to become familiar working with the computer. To start again, press the fast forward key. Does the computer need to be programmed? Press No. Follow the instructions of the computer as before. It may be helpful to rewind the tape to Start Cast On and follow along with the video again. Even the most experienced knitter makes mistakes. The E6000 computer is also designed to help with these mistakes. The computer is programmed to give error messages. These messages are listed in the instruction manual, starting on page 182. If the lock gets stuck while knitting, which is not uncommon for beginners, the manual shows how to deal with this problem on page 187. If unraveling is needed, the lock should be put to the right. Then take the color of yarn in the feeding eyelet and gently pull the last stitch to loosen it. The needles may come up as this is done. Continue to pull the stitches out until the yarn is on the right side of the knitting. When the correction is complete, be sure to recheck the tension of the yarn. To continue after unraveling, review the instructions on page 188 of the instruction manual. If there is a difficulty that requires the knitting be started over, Press the Fast Forward key. Then press No to the program question, and the machine will be ready to cast on without going through the programming process again. If there are ever any problems that this tape or the manuals do not help with, your dealer has been trained to assist. If the knitting machine is not used for several hours or days, it is best to switch the computer off. A rechargeable battery keeps the old program in memory up to 10 days. The next practice piece will teach how to program more than one pattern into the same piece of knitting. The E6000 is capable of having as many patterns programmed as there are letters in the alphabet, 26. Bring the computer along using the Fast Forward key until Program is on the display. Return to the earlier section on computer programming for help in doing this if needed. Press Enter, yes. Press Enter, yes. Which cast-on is to be used? In the instruction manual, there are different types of cast-ons beginning on page 134. The cast-on selected is determined by the type of knitting to be done, and also the type of garment being produced. For this next practice garment, use cast-on number 6. Press 6, then press Enter. Is that all the stitch patterns desired? Press No. Which is going to be stitch pattern A, or the first pattern? In the stitch pattern book are nearly 700 patterns which the computer has in its memory. The 4-digit number at the bottom of each picture is the number assigned to that stitch pattern. The 3-digit number next to the stitch pattern number is the knitting technique. The knitting technique determines the type of knitting that the pattern will be put on. For this garment, stitch pattern A is number 1119 on page 46 of the pattern book. Press 1119, press Enter. Is the pattern to be altered? Press No. Which knitting technique is to be used with this pattern? The knitting techniques are shown in the instruction manual. For this practice piece, use number 176, found on page 155 of the instruction manual. Press 176. Press Enter. Is the pattern to be enlarged or positioned? Press No. Is there to be a test piece of this program? Press No. Is this all the stitch patterns to be used? Press No. What is the stitch pattern for B, or the second pattern? Use pattern number 1127 on page 61 of the pattern book. Press 1127. Press Enter. Is the pattern to be altered? Press No. Which knitting technique is to be used with this pattern? Use number 176. Press 176. Press Enter. Is the pattern to be enlarged or positioned? Press No. Is this all the stitch patterns to be used? Press No. Which stitch pattern is used for C, or the third pattern? Use pattern number 1005 on page 21 of the pattern book. Press 1005. Press Enter. Is the pattern to be altered? Press No. Which knitting technique is to be used with this pattern? Use 132. Press 132. Press Enter. Is this all the stitch patterns to be used? Press No. Which stitch pattern is used for D, or the fourth pattern? Use pattern number 133 on page 17 of the pattern book. Press 133. Press Enter. Is this all the stitch patterns to be used? Press Enter. Yes. The computer asks if the garment is going to be formed or shaped. Press No. How many of the left needles are going to be in working position? Bring up 25 pushers left of center on the front bed. Press 25 minus. Press Enter. How many of the right needles are going to be in working position? Bring up 25 pushers right of center on the front bed. Remember to put the edge springs on the last needles in working position on the front bed. Make sure the latches are closed underneath so that the needles move freely. As only the front needles will be used for this practice piece, take the orange ruler and bring all back bed needles out of working position by pushing them down completely. Press 25. Press Enter. The computer says it is time to start the cast on. Press Enter. Move the lock to the start position. Press Enter. Press Enter. Set the front lock to SX. Press Enter. Set the back lock to GX. Press Enter. Move the lock across with the feeding eyelet and strippers removed. Check to make sure the racking handle is down. Press Enter.
Are the 50 needles and pushers on the front bed in working position? Press Enter.
Move the lock across empty. Bring color 1 into the lock. Press Enter. Set the stitch size. On the front lock, set the stitch size to 4 1/2. Press Enter. Insert the black strippers. The black strippers are used for single bed knitting. Press Enter. Set the front lock to LX. Press Enter. The display is no longer flashing, so it is time to start knitting. Knit 4 rows. On the front lock, set the stitch size to 5 1/2. Press Enter. End of cast on. Press Enter. Knit 10 rows. Press ABC key. The computer asks if stitch pattern A is the pattern to be knit. Press Enter. Yes. Set the front lock to SX. Press Enter. Set the back lock to GX. Press Enter. Move the lock across empty. Make sure the racking handle is down. Press Enter.
Are the 50 needles on the front bed in working position? Press Enter.
Move the lock across empty. Notice that the lock moved the pushers in preparation for knitting this pattern. Use both colors, starting with color 1 and changing color every 2 rows. Press Enter. The stitch size on the front lock remains on 5 1/2. Press Enter. Insert the black strippers. Press Enter. Set the front lock to LX. Press Enter. Knit 56 rows. Remember to change color every 2 rows. After 10 rows, release the yarn from the clip underneath. Press ABC. The computer asks if stitch pattern B is the pattern to be knit next. Press Enter. Set the front lock on SX. Press Enter. Set the back lock on GX. Press Enter. Move the lock across empty. Make sure the racking handle is down. Press Enter. Check needles. Press Enter.
Move the lock across.
Notice that the pushers have been moved in preparation for the next pattern. Put color number 1 in the lock. Change color every 2 rows. Press Enter. Stitch size on front lock remains at 5 1/2. Press Enter. Insert black strippers. Press Enter. The front lock should be set to LX. Press Enter. Knit 64 rows. Remember to change color every 2 rows. Press ABC. Work with the computer as with stitch patterns A and B. When the display stops flashing, turn the videotape on again. Start knitting. After the first row is knit, the computer says that color 2 is to be put in the lock on the next row back to the right. Pick up color 2 with the lock. Continue to knit until the computer says to change the color again.
Knit 42 rows following the computer's directions until the row counter reads 180. If the display does not say row count 180, press Enter. Then press ABC to bring up the next pattern. Is stitch pattern D the pattern to use now? Press Enter. Work with the computer to set up stitch pattern D. When the computer window instruction reads KX and is no longer flashing, return to the video. Knit 48 rows and watch the computer to see when the color needs to be changed. When the row counter reads 230, set the front lock to N. Take the feeding eyelet out of the lock. Move the empty lock across the bed 2 times. With the left hand, hold on to the knitting underneath. Break off the yarn and secure the ends from the cones into the yarn clip. With this practice piece, 4 different patterns were done and 2 knitting techniques used. Isn't it easy to find where each is on the knitting? Next is knitting a scarf in 2 colors. Choose other colors if desired.
but the yarn should be of the same quality and weight. Bring the computer along until program is on the display. Program the computer using the following information. Use cast on number 2. For stitch pattern A, use number 142. The needle should be 20 to the left and right on both front and back beds. Bring the 5 extra needles and pushers on front bed out of work position. That is, bring the pushers completely down into their rail. Set the edge springs on the last working needle on both front and back beds.
Prepare for the cast on following the computer information. When the row counter display is in the window, knit 1 row and return to the video.
Set stitch size to 3 1/2 on both locks. Press Enter. Set the back lock to CX. Press Enter. Knit 2 rows. Lock at the left. Set stitch size to 4 on both locks. Press Enter. Set the back lock to N.
Knit 1 row.
When End Cast On shows on the computer window, return to instructions on this tape. End of cast on. Press Enter. The row count will appear in the window as 4 rows. To bring up the instructions for the stitch pattern, press ABC. With the assistance of the computer, continue to knit. When 10 rows of knitting are complete, release the yarn from the clip underneath. Continue knitting until the scarf is the length desired. Next is the cast off. Set the front and back lock to N. Take color 1 into the lock. Knit 2 rows. Move the edge springs out. Hook the eyelet of the double end bodkin onto the needle head of the first needle at right on the back bed. It helps to pull down slightly on the knitting underneath. Pull the needle up as high as possible so the stitch slides behind the open latch. Push down until the stitch slips over the closed latch onto the double end bodkin. Move the double end bodkin so the stitch slides to the other end. Hook the eyelet onto the needle opposite. Slide the stitch onto the new needle by tilting the bodkin up. Do the same with all back stitches. All the needles in working position on the front bed have 2 stitches on them. All the needles now empty on the back bed should be in working position. On the back lock, increase the stitch size to 5 1/2. Knit 1 row